Hi, I'm Shawna.
And I'm Liz.
Welcome to Getting Bookish, a weekly podcast where we will talk about different book-related topics, let you know what we're reading, and even answer Q&As from you.
Be sure to visit our website, gettingbookish.com, and check us out on Facebook and Instagram at Getting Bookish. If you enjoy our podcast, we'd love for you to subscribe and leave us a rating and review, which helps us to be seen by other book lovers.
With all that said, we hope you'll enjoy Getting Bookish with us.
Enjoy the podcast.
Hello. Hey, Shawna.
Hi.
Hi, friends. We are super excited to be back again this week, and I am really excited about our conversation tonight.
Yes.
Tonight we are going to be talking about
Dun, dun, dun.
ebooks. I know. Ebooks versus printed books versus audiobooks. And before we get started, though, we definitely want to say that we are both, for sure, team read, which means whatever format you're choosing to read, we think it's fantastic. And tonight we just wanted to kind of put our 2 cents in on this hot topic. I feel like everyone is always talking about this. Everybody has really specific opinions. And we are just excited to chat about this hot literary topic.
Yes, and some people can get very aggressive with their opinion on this subject. And like Liz says, we just are excited that you are getting the information in your brain, however it gets in there. But of course, we do have our own personal opinions. And I think that's what everybody has to remember, is that this is just your personal opinion of what you prefer based on how you react to the stories, whether, because some people are more audible, people, and some people are more visual. So again, it's a very personal choice, but we want to discuss all of them.
I'm so excited. So, shall we talk first about the three kinds of books?
Yes.
All right. So, physical books, that's what we think of all the time. A physical, actual book that you can hold in your hand. You turn real pages. No one's reading it to you. You're doing the work. It doesn't have a battery that's going to die.
But you have to have light to read it.
This is very true. The conditions have to be right. I feel like for any of these, the conditions have to be right.
Yeah, absolutely.
To enjoy any of them.
Yes.
And then ebooks, I was going to grab, I have a Kindle, and I was going to grab it and be like, and hold it up for our YouTube watchers, and I couldn't find it because I am moving and it's already packed.
Yeah, so you can
along with all the goodies behind me.
I know, it's all gone. But you can have a Kindle, you can have a Nook, you can use your iPhone or whatever phone you have. You can read on a computer, whatever screen you have for a reader, a screen reader.
Yes.
Electronic book.
Yes. I feel like I forget sometimes that that's what ebook stands for. Electronic. Because I was like, oh, that's a smart way to describe that. I'm like, okay, come on. That's literally what the name means. And then the last category is, of course, audiobooks.
Yes.
And audiobooks, it's very interesting sometimes when I talk to someone and they're like, oh, like my grandfather listens to audiobooks because he can't read books anymore. But I feel like audiobooks are attractive for lots of different people for lots of different reasons. It's being able to listen to someone else or a whole cast of other people.
And they are definitely on the rise thanks to Audible.
Yes. For sure.
It is getting crazy out there with audiobooks.
Yeah.
In good ways.
Yeah, I feel like, which is wonderful, because sometimes when I go to listen to an older book, one that was recorded a long time ago, just the quality control in general is real low. And so I enjoy them so much more now. I mean, they have actors that are reading them, so there's all that great inflection and voices, and yes. But I feel like that's getting more into opinion. So
I was going to say, we're going to get there. We're going to get to the pros and cons and opinions.
Yes, so audiobooks are pre-recorded and the reader gets to listen to the story. They're not actually reading along with their eyes. So,
yes.
All right.
Should we talk about the pros and cons of each that we think?
I think so. So,
and these are going to be personal, right? These are our personal opinions.
Yeah,
because
I think that every person enjoys books in different ways.
Yes.
So, yes. So what are your personal opinions, Shawna?
Well,
I'm excited.
Let's go back to starting with print books, and let's talk about the pros and cons that we feel of print books, and we'll work our way down just like we did with introducing the styles.
Yes.
Print books. So the pros for me for a print book, I like turning pages. And I like seeing that visual of I'm almost done and I have this many pages. And every time I close my book, I always look at how much more I have left, how much I've read. And it's just like this thing that I do. And I like feeling the book. I like smelling the book. I like owning and seeing the books on my shelves. I like the colorfulness. One of the pros is seeing a book and having a memory attached to that book. And even though I don't stand there and I think for minutes on this memory, it's that fleeting, like I sweep my eyes over it and I think, oh, that book. And it's just a real quick, I read that on a cruise with my husband, and it's so quick or something like that. And I just love that. And so I feel like books feel like friends.
Yeah.
And so I like to be surrounded by them because it's such an easy way to fill your house with, I don't know, just different worlds. And it's exciting to me. Cons for books, they take up space. So, and that's not a problem for me. So I just want to put that out there. I don't care, but I could see eventually I might want to be a little bit careful so that it doesn't just look like book clutter everywhere.
And it's not clutter if it's books.
Another thing is that I know that I spend quite a bit of money sometimes on books. I'm whisper because my husband's out there. But and I like hardback books. And so that's obviously a little bit more expensive. You can sometimes find them at used bookstores, but if you want those new copies or the, new releases, you're going to have to, fork over the money. But I don't know. To me, the pros outweigh the cons for print books. What about you?
I agree with everything you just said. I love being able to turn a page. I love knowing, because I feel like I can pace my expectations based on how much of the book is left.
Yes.
So if you're thinking, oh, this kind of feels like the end, but you still have 100 pages left in the book, it's clearly not the end.
Anything could still happen.
Yeah. And so I feel like those are cues that I've learned having held books in my hand my entire life. Mm-hmm. And so I agree. I agree with all those things. I decorate with books. I have bookshelves like in every room of my house. I think I'm at 12 boxes of books right now. And so there are a lot of books in my home. I love decorating with them. I love having them. They do take up space, so I understand that as a con. But at the same time, they're kind of my decorating style. Books are my decorating style. And so I don't think about them as taking up space. And I've had to learn to pass them on. Mm-hmm. When I know, I'm not going to read this again. I'm not going to enjoy this again. I can give it to someone else. They can enjoy it now. I can let it go.
You can let it go.
Yeah. And so cons for me would be, why is that so hard? I'm like, there are zero. They are, I would say that if I go somewhere, like if I'm going away for the weekend, I'm going to want to bring 2 or 3 books with me. They're heavy and they take up space. And so when I go, and I mean, I bring them with me anyway, I'm willing to make that sacrifice. I don't need a second pair of shoes. I need a second book. But, but they have some weight to them. And so I think that can be a con. It's so sad to even say there's a con to a book.
I know.
If I had to choose one, that would be it. So,
well, real quick, I want to go back to something that you said because
yeah.
I was reading a magazine. I was reading an article in Time magazine, and it was talking about printed books versus other forms of books. And you said something that the article was talking about, and it said that there's this narrative arc, and you can visually see that by how far you are along in the book. And sometimes that plays a huge part in how you're responding to the book. And even though like ebooks will tell you percentage-wise how much book you've read or how many pages or whatever, and audiobooks do as well, it's still not the same. Your brain doesn't like perceive it the same way as seeing the actual pages that you have left. And like you said, you could have 100 pages left and anything could happen. But same if the story wasn't tied up and everything was so intense and you only have one chapter left and you have this many pages left, you're thinking,
yeah.
And it has that kind of build, And so
right.
It's just funny that you hit on that. And I was like, I just read that in the article.
That is really funny. And I think it's probably like a very learned thing because we've held books in our hands our entire lives. So, in 200 years when they're potentially not printing books anymore. I know, but think about it. It's probably going to happen. And books are just ebooks. Mm-hmm. Those like native users who have never really held a book in their hand, they'll probably experience it that way.
Yeah, that's why we have to hoard all the books right now.
I know. Well, and that's something I find so fascinating. This is completely off topic, but about like dystopian novels, they talk about that a lot. Like they go into someone's office and they have like 4 books in their office, and the person's like in shock. They're like, oh, they have books. Like, oh my goodness! Like to get to that point in the world where you feel like that excited to see a printed book.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that's just another reason why we need to hang on to them.
Exactly. Yeah. And then one of the things that we didn't cover with cons, because I know, they're going to keep seeping out throughout this podcast.
Right,
I know.
Right.
This might have to be a part 1, part 2. Is it's easy. Let's say you have somebody over and they're just talking about something. They don't know what to read, or they, whatever. And you're like, oh, I have the perfect one for you. And you can just get it off the shelf and hand it to them. Yes. If you have it on any of the other forms, they would either have to download it or purchase it or, whatever. And the chances of them doing that after they go home and forget about it are slim. But if you can hand them the actual copy, then that's so much easier. And that's just another reason. Read this.
I know. There are so many pros. Okay, so there are so many reasons to read a physical book. What are some reasons we read ebooks? Well, first, I'm curious. Do you have an e-reader?
Okay. So I don't. But I do have the Kindle app on my phone.
Okay.
And so that is what I use. But I don't have a Nook or a Kindle or anything. So if I want to read something, it's going to be on my little phone like this. But I want you to go first for this one.
Okay.
Your pros and cons.
I will go first. So pros. So I will be very transparent. I have a Kindle, and I have when I first got it, I used it pretty consistently for the first 6 months, and then I haven't used it since then. So even though I feel like there are lots of pros to using an e-reader, I personally don't. So I think that some pros are you could get a book immediately, which, like, if you're reading a really good series and you finish and you're like, I have to find out what happens right now, and it's 1:00 in the morning, so I'm going to download it. You have that option. You can download it right then and start reading. And so that's a huge pro for an e-reader. Another pro is you can have all your books with you. So like I was saying before, a con for printed books is they can be heavy. So you don't want to take them all with you. And sometimes I don't know what I want to read next. It depends on how I've felt finishing the book I'm finishing. And so I want more options. I want more options. And so that's a pro. Being able to read like in bed. Or like I know like this isn't a concern for me, but I know that like for married couples, for example, the other one person's asleep, it's a lot easier to read on a Kindle because it's backlit or whatever kind of device you're using. But for me, the cons are I use screens all day long. Like I work sitting at a computer, I'm using my phone, I'm just using and interacting with a screen all day. And so when I get to sit down and read, that is not the format I'm going to sit down and use because I've been doing that. Because then it feels more like work.
Yeah.
I think in my mind, because it's like, oh,
another screen.
Doing this again. And so I think that maybe if I had a job where I wasn't using a screen all day, it would be really different. But for me, it's just not that appealing. And I miss holding a book. Like the physicality of it is just really different. And yeah, so that's the biggest con for me. The other con is I was always losing the charger. Like, because they don't die that fast. It's not like your phone. You always know where your charger is because you're going to have to charge it once a day. They don't die that fast. So it might take a week, and then you're like, where did I put it? It's gone. It's completely vanished in my home. So that's a con for me also. So how about for you?
Okay, well, it might be pretty obvious since I don't even have a Kindle or a Nook. But I do have, like I said, I have the app on my phone, the Kindle app, and I have a bunch of books on there because when I see that books are free, like a lot of times Amazon will do the free books and everything, I do throw them on there because I'm like, oh, free books? Like, yeah, and there's even kids' books that you can get for free and stuff. So I have quite a few. I think I may have read one on my phone. So so the pros to me are kind of, again, what you said is it's easier to read in bed. I do have a book light for my actual book, which I found a really great one, and I love it, but it is really bright, and the e-reader would be less bright.
Yeah.
Pro, you have a lot of choices, like you said. I feel kind of like I'm not a good person to talk about ebooks with because I don't do them a lot. To me, the ebooks don't, maybe this is kind of like what you were saying. I don't find a lot of joy in the ebook. It's kind of, yay, it's a story, but I'm holding my phone. Another thing too is, I have 4 little kids and I try my best to not be on my phone around them. And even if I'm on my phone reading a book, they don't know what I'm doing. They just see that mommy's on her phone again. And so if I'm going to read and I'm around them, I would prefer to be holding a physical book because they'll see that and see, oh, she's reading a book. And so I guess that would be a con for me personally because I just don't want them to see me always on the phone. A con, I don't have a big enough screen. Like I said, I'm using my phone. So, I get this much text on it.
Right. So you're like scrolling or flipping pages all the time.
It's just like this constant, like every tiny paragraph is just like a scroll. So I'm working. Like, I don't want to work while I'm reading.
And do you feel rushed when you have to do it that way?
I do.
When it's just a little bit? Because I felt like that on my phone before.
Yeah, I do.
Where I'm like,
exactly. And then I'm like, I need to scroll up enough so that I hit the end of a paragraph or I hit a sentence, or it's like, I feel like one giant run-on sentence. It's a lot of mental work for me, where reading a print book, it's just that, nice flow. And then obviously audio you're listening to, we'll get into that in a minute. So when I think about ebooks, I just think meh.
Right.
kind of my opinion. But I know that a lot of people prefer those because of the ease. They always have their tablet with them. And sometimes they need just that quick on-the-go thing. And again, if you can just read a little here and there, that's great. But for me, it just doesn't work.
Right. I think that if you don't have a lot of space, like maybe you live in a tiny apartment, it can make a lot of sense if you travel a lot. And I also know there was a lady in the bookstore this week, and she was telling me, she was an older lady, and she was so excited because her daughter had just gotten her a Kindle. And it was just such a different kind of person to tell me they were so excited about like an e-reader, and because you can make the font large.
Yes, that is a bonus.
And she was like, I'm so excited because now I can get any book I want, and I can make it big enough that I can actually sit and read it. And I was like, oh, I love that.
Yeah.
So I think that for some people, it really is a great format. It just isn't for me. It's not my favorite. And when I review books, when I read books, like pre-releases that are reviews, they're almost always digital copies.
Yeah. And
I feel like when I start one of those, I am already like kind of not loving it. Yeah. And it's because of the format. And so I always have to remind myself in my mind, no, you're reading a format that you don't prefer. You can't take it out on this book.
But you don't have a choice.
Remember just to talk about the story and not that you didn't enjoy the ebook version. So, but I think it's hard. I do want to say real quick, though, that I am interested in what the Kindle Paperwhite is like, because it's a different kind. I don't understand the whole technology of it, but it's supposed to feel more like, or supposed to look more like what like a book page looks like, rather than like a reflective screen. So it's supposed to be easier on your eyes. You're supposed to be able to like read it outside in bright light. That's another con for e-readers.
Oh, yes.
Like if the sun is reflecting on it, just like you can't see your phone.
So
it's
annoying.
The same thing.
It's 2019. Why haven't we fixed this issue?
Right. Surely we could figure this out. And so, because it has like a very matte screen.
Yeah.
And I haven't ever gotten to like sit down and read a book on something like on a Paperwhite before. Yeah. And I've heard that it kind of takes away like that screen experience.
Yeah.
So if you have one, I'm curious.
Yeah, let us know.
For our listeners, if you have a Paperwhite, like how does it compare to like another kind of e-reader?
Yeah.
I'm very curious. I'm always willing to try. Like every time they're on sale, I'm like, maybe I should buy one.
How much are they?
See. They're more. I want to say they're about like 120.
Oh, that's not bad.
It isn't, but I got my Kindle for like 35.
Oh.
So
see, I don't even know the prices. I'm like, I think that's good.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe I'll buy one tomorrow just to check it out.
Right. Well, if you get one, we will all be waiting for your feedback.
I'm like, yeah, I'm not a big fan of ebooks, but now I have to buy a Paperwhite. I don't even know what I'm doing.
Right. But like I've seen them like at Target, like they'll have one on display. I'm like, oh, I kind of like this matte screen.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I would still use it because it's still holding a tablet versus holding a book. And evidently I'm very old school that way.
I feel you. All right, let's get down to our last format, which is audiobooks. I feel like this is the most like conflicting one.
I think so too.
And so let's go with the cons. Let's just share together and end this way. For one of the cons for audiobooks is, and I know I'm going to hit on one of your favorite ones, is full cast.
Oh, you don't like full cast?
No, I like full cast.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Don't worry, we can still be friends.
Seriously? What?
Did I say cons? Is that what
yeah.
Is that why?
Yeah.
Oh, you were confused?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Pros. Ugh. I'm like, why aren't you getting excited? We're on the same boat here.
I was like, wait. Full cast is my favorite.
Yes. The pros for audiobooks.
Okay.
Sorry, guys.
Yay, pros.
Pros, full cast. It's like a performance.
Yes.
And I can hear different people and I don't have to think, oh, wait. Especially for people who don't fluctuate their voice very much. Sometimes I'm thinking, oh, wait, who's that? Oh, the mom is talking now, or, whatever. Full cast, you don't have that issue.
No.
So that's...
I am 100% with you. I love full cast or a great reader.
Yeah, Jim Dale.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we talk about him in every podcast. We are obviously fangirls.
And Peter Dennis. If you have not listened to Winnie the Pooh read by Peter Dennis, do it. You have to. He does the most amazing Piglet. He does all the voices. And when he does Piglet, he does the little snorts. And it's the cutest thing in the world. My kids laugh every single time he snorts. It's so cute.
I love it. Well, and I think that's part of the magic of an audiobook is when I read in my mind, I'm giving voices to things. Like, right. I'm not reading it out loud, but I'm reading an accent. I'm reading this character in a squeaky voice or whatever. And so I love that about an audiobook. I'm an auditory learner. And so I love being read to in general. I listened to my mom read books aloud until I was a teenager. Like I love that. Yeah, I love being read to. And I think that listening to an audiobook harkens back to that feeling of someone telling you a story.
It's like a comfort.
And yeah, it's very nostalgic. And I love that. I love one of my big pros is that I can do something else, but I'm still reading. Like I can be working, but I'm still reading.
You're still listening to a story.
Yes. And so that's a huge pro for me because then I feel like I don't feel guilty. Not that I usually do feel guilty about sitting and reading, but I get to be enjoying something while doing like mundane tasks.
Yeah, like laundry and dishes and things like that. Yeah, I totally agree. I do a lot of driving sometimes. I drive really far for our literary society. It's like an hour there and back. That's 2 hours of an audiobook that I can listen to. And I mean, I can either listen to the radio, but that just doesn't have, I don't know. I like being involved in a story. And sometimes it's nice to put on the radio, but I've gotten really into audiobooks lately, and so everything else is just kind of dying away. Like I don't need to listen to that song for the 50th time.
Yeah.
I even got a waterproof speaker for my shower so that I can turn the audiobook on in my shower so I don't have to miss out on 15-20 minutes there either.
I now very much need this speaker, and so I'm going to get whatever it is that Shawna got, and it will be in the podcast notes because I really want one and other people might want one too.
I can't believe you don't have one.
I don't, and I feel like I'm always so annoyed when I go to get in the shower because like I'll play my audiobook and it doesn't matter how loud you turn it up.
No, it doesn't work.
It is not loud enough.
And then you miss something, and then you just get annoyed.
Yeah, and then I have actually gotten out of the shower before to pause the audiobook because I'm like, I'm missing too much. I can't hear anything. So that could be a con, but we found a workaround.
You need a speaker.
Yes, I love it. I love it.
And then there's also a lot of like actors and actresses reading books now. But I love listening to voices that I'm familiar with reading the books. And that's why I like memoirs too, listening to, because a lot of times the author is reading their own book. And I love that because then whatever they've put emphasis on, whatever they've said sarcastically or whatever, that's their true meaning of what they wanted you to hear in the book.
Yes, that's what I love. I think a lot of nonfiction ends up being read by the author, like David Sedaris reads his books, which makes them just that much more hilarious. But also Jenny Lawson, she wrote Furiously Happy. I don't know if you're familiar with that book, but it's a book about kind of her journey so far with depression, but also just about her life. And she's hilarious in the way she writes. But the audiobook, she adds things. And she's very open about the fact that she's like, oh, I have to tell you this little thing. It's not in the book, but I'm going to add it right now. And I just love
cute.
that. So you're like, so she's actually like having a conversation with you. Like she breaks the fourth wall and is like, oh, hey, this isn't in the book, but I have to tell you this right now because I just thought of it, kind of thing.
That.
And so that's really fun, too, when there's something special, or in the physical book, there are some photographs. And so she describes them in the audio, which is so much funnier than what the photograph looks like listening to her describe them. So if you guys haven't listened to either of Jenny Lawson's books, they are fabulous. But I agree. Another huge perk to audiobooks is getting to listen to the author read their own works. And I'm like, it's all perks for me. It's all pros. I'm trying to think of a con.
Oh, well, you know what? Before we get to the cons, I do want to say also, a lot of times narrators, so I narrated a few audiobooks, and I talked directly to the authors on every book. Now, obviously, if the author has passed away or the rights are with somebody else or whatever, but you're talking with somebody, and that person is letting you know how they want their story to be told. So that was really nice, too. When I was reading a couple of the books, a lot of authors didn't care. They just would say, yep, sounds good. But there were some that said, okay, I like that, but I really want you to sound a little bit more excited here because this was a turning point for me or whatever, turning point for this character or something. So, amp it up a little bit. And so that was really cool to know that as you're reading, there's somebody kind of watching and guiding you with that. So even if it's not read by the author or if it's a fiction book, there's still somebody that's trying to guide the reader. And, there's good readers and not so good readers. We'll get into that. That's going to be a con. I know that.
That is a con.
But yeah, so I really enjoyed that. Another pro is that you can speed it up, like on Audible.
Yes.
There's some books that are read very slowly, and that's fine. But sometimes I have to speed it up to like 1.75 to even get it to my natural listening. Otherwise, I'll kind of zone. And I don't want to zone. So I know the faster I can listen to it, the more I'm paying attention. But I don't want to listen to it too fast because then I'll miss things.
Right. I don't want to speed through it, but I want it. Yeah, and I do love that being adjustable. And I feel like, I remember listening to audiobooks, well, even just like 6 years ago before I knew about Audible and before my library had ebooks that you could check out, like e-audiobooks that you could check out. You would check out a book on CD. And before that, it was a book on tape. And there isn't any control. Like, you just put it in the CD player and it just plays at its speed. And, like, that was not an enjoyable way for me to listen to a book. First of all, I have, like, this giant container of, like, 17 discs. And so I feel like, yes, like, with these, like with Audible or with any of like these digital players on your phone, there's just a lot more control. You're not going to lose your spot. Mm-hmm. Ooh, that's another pro. You don't lose your spot. Your bookmark is not going to fall out.
And on Audible, and I only say Audible, I know there's other ones because that's the only one that I use. So I'm not purposely discounting any others. But on Audible, you can save clips and send them to people. Yes. That's the coolest thing ever. I just figured that out on my own the other day, and I thought I was so special and smart. I was like, oh, this is amazing. And you can clip it and make notes.
I haven't ever sent one to someone, but I do use it to make notes while I'm listening, because if I'm going to go back and write a review on the book later, sometimes I want to be like, oh my goodness, that was like that was such a great line. Like,
Yeah.
I want to remember that because I want to put it in my review or something. And I love that you can just, so I don't need like a notebook.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I'm reading, I usually have like my reading notebook with me so that I could make a note of something like that. But like when it's audio, it's just a tiny bit easier.
You know what else is another pro that I was just thinking about is, you know how on Audible it lists, like when you move to a new chapter, it says how long that chapter is in minutes?
Yes.
I kind of like that because I know, can I get through a chapter? I'm pumping my gas and I'm like, this chapter is 3 minutes. Okay, I'll just listen to the whole chapter, and even if I'm done pumping my gas, I'm just gonna have a minute left so I can like finish that chapter, because I'm a chapter finisher. It's really hard for me to finish in the middle of a chapter. It's really hard.
So this actually just happened to me tonight. I was coming inside because we were going to record this podcast, and I was listening to my audiobook in my car. And so I get to my house and I'm like, oh, if I turn the car off, the audiobook is just automatically going to turn off. And so I pulled it up real quick and I'm like, oh, there's only a minute and a half left in this chapter. So I'm just going to sit here in my car.
It makes
but
it easy.
I like knowing, yeah. Because you don't, like, if it was 9 minutes left, I would have been like, okay, I can't sit in my car for 9 minutes. Like, the neighbors will think I'm a crazy person. So...
That's hilarious.
So I love that too. I love getting to check them out from my library.
Mm-hmm.
And not all libraries have a very large collection of e-audiobooks, but here's a library tip.
Ooh.
Depending on your state, you can oftentimes get multiple library cards. And so, like in my state, I live in Colorado, you can get a library card for any library branch in the state. And so when we go to Denver, for example, Denver is the largest city in Colorado, I got a Denver library card, and how perfect, because they have a massive collection of both ebooks and e-audiobooks.
Yeah.
And so my local library has maybe 100 e-audiobooks, but Denver Public Library has thousands and thousands and thousands.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So there's a little tip. Find out. If your library maybe doesn't even offer, like if you live in a really small town, they might not even offer. But get a library card from somewhere else in your state.
All right. And now let's talk about the cons for Audible. And you kind of hit on one of them that was a con for me, was if there's photos in the book. Like I listened to Mr. Rogers, or it's a long title, but it's basically Mr. Rogers' biography.
Yeah.
And I knew there were going to be pictures, and so I listened to it and I missed out on all the pictures. And I love seeing the pictures as they're talking about it, and they show where he grew up and when he met his wife and all this stuff. So then I went to Barnes and Noble's and I was just flipping through the pictures, trying to catch myself up on it.
And that is one thing that in the olden days when we had books on CD, the book would oftentimes come with a bonus CD that you would like put into your computer or like play in your DVD player that would show you the pictures.
Oh, that's nice.
Because a lot of children's books were like that. Like you could
Mm-hmm.
see all the pictures at the end,
Mm-hmm.
like after you had listened. Oh, that reminds me of another pro.
Okay,
Pros for kids that when they're learning to read.
Oh, yes.
A huge pro, especially for like a struggling reader, is to listen to like a chapter book audio read aloud while they're following along in the book. So that's another pro.
It is.
But a con for me, I think that when I'm reading a book, like I can read a book in a more social setting
Mm-hmm.
than I can listen to an audiobook.
Okay.
An audiobook, because I'm either going to put in my headphones, which means I'm now ignoring everyone,
Yeah.
or I'm going to like just start playing it on my phone. Like it's so much more like I need to be alone to enjoy this versus a book you can read like for you. I mean, I don't know if you listen to audio also, and you might, but like if you're sitting with kids, you can read your book, but maybe like you can't hear what they're saying anymore if you put in your headphones kind of thing. And so I feel like that's a con, is just not being able to participate in the group. Not that I'm necessarily participating when I'm reading, because I would very much like everyone to stay quiet, but
no, that makes so much sense, because when you're reading, you're still able to tune people out and focus on your book. But if somebody asks you a question really quick, like if you're working at your bookstore, you'll immediately be able to answer them. Where if you have your earpods in, you're like, oh, I'm sorry, what was that? And then that just feels rude. And you know,
like I was busy and you now interrupted me.
And then they'd probably be like, oh, never mind, it's okay.
And that is a perfect example. Like when I'm at the bookstore, I mean, I read all the time, but I'll only read a physical book. Because even if I'm reading, like I don't want to read an ebook. First of all, we don't sell ebooks, so it seems like kind of counter to what we do there. But also, it just looks like I'm like playing on my phone.
Yeah.
Like the same thing that you were saying, like with your kids. Like I could be sitting there playing Candy Crush. Like the person doesn't know that I'm reading a book.
Right.
And so, and yeah, headphones in a public setting, or when you're at work at the bookstore.
Yeah.
Like it seems like a sassy teenager, not like a...
It does. And another con is the narrator, or can be a con.
Yes.
Is the narrator. Or the quality of the recording. If I hear a lot of white noise or clicks and bumps and things that take you out of the story, it's really hard for me to pay attention.
Mispronouncing a word.
Oh, mispronouncing a word. Or if...
That one's hard for me.
It is. Or if somebody... Here's something that's really hard for me, is older men doing young girls' voices.
Why do they have to make them sound so ridiculous?
I really have a problem with that. And I'm going to have to say...
I came in the room and asked. I feel like it's like this ridiculously squeaky thing that happens.
And here's something, it's funny, because you know the book that I've been talking to you about, what is it called? Night at the Circus, or...
Oh, The Night Circus.
The Night Circus. So I started listening to that on Audible. And I love the story. I love it.
The story's amazing.
I had to stop it. And I'm going to have to get the book from the library. And I love Jim Dale. I love him. Yeah. But him doing the girl voice is messing me up. And he's doing a great job, because I love him. But he's kind of making it sound, and it's just taking me out of the story. And I feel like it would be okay if I have already read the book. But I want to read the book first, and then I feel like I'd be able to listen to the audio and be okay.
Yeah.
But for my first time through, I had to stop. And I'm like, I really am enjoying the story. I need to go get the book.
Yes. So. And that's one that I think I had read it twice before I listened to it.
Yeah, so it probably didn't even faze you.
And so I didn't even think about it. But I do agree. I also think that there was a trend for a little while, probably like the early 90s, where they had older women reading everything. Mm-hmm. And there are a couple books that I started and I was like, is there a more modern recording of this? Because it's just like, or like a romance book. I don't want someone who sounds like my grandmother reading me a romance book. It feels uncomfortable. Yeah. I'm like, nope, this isn't for me. This one isn't good. No, thank you. But yeah, I think that oftentimes a narrator makes or breaks a book, and that's what absolutely. I love about the popularity. Like, I think that Audible is doing amazing things because they have a lot of books now. And I also pretty much only use Audible, but I do also use the library, so that's why we're talking about Audible. Mm-hmm. But we are not sponsored by Audio, although we would love to be if they wanted to sponsor us.
We'll talk about you more.
Yeah. But I love that they're doing their like Audible originals or whatever.
Yes, like Netflix originals and Hulu originals, and now you have to have Audible.
They are all about it over there. But they're taking like these classic books that maybe they had been last recorded 15 years ago, and they're like, no, let's grab we're gonna read some Hans Christian Andersen stories. Let's grab a Disney Channel actress and have her read these aloud, because then, and I think that, like, especially for kids, they're like, oh, I know who this person is reading this book. And I think that it just adds those more layers.
Personality.
Yeah. So, we went back to prose again.
I know. So here's a con for me. I feel like I would have more cons than you. And this is, so audiobooks are hard for me. Even though I have a lot of pros for them, they are very, very hard for me. I feel like I zone out easily. And I've noticed that when I listen to audiobooks, I'll listen for a few minutes, then I'm like, I just went through my whole grocery list. What happened? Now I'm like pushing the back 30, trying to figure out. And then I'll be like, well, now I've gone so far back, but I don't know what they're saying. Did I miss this entire chapter? And then I find myself just going back 8 minutes to the beginning of the chapter and listening to it again. And I know a book that's maybe 10 hours, I've now made it 30 hours. So I can forget any of Kate Morton's books where it's already like, a 24-hour book. That's going to be like 60 hours for me by the time I re-listen to it 3 times. But so that's really hard. I have to, if it's a book that I am really, really, really excited about, I can't listen to it, which is so weird, but it's kind of like the night circus. I know that I'm having problems paying attention for whatever reason. So a lot of the times I will listen to nonfiction on audio. So I feel like I'm not going to miss the story if I zone out for 30 seconds. I'm not going to miss that, oh, somebody just murdered so-and-so or they I don't know, put out this piece of information and now I'm like totally lost, or they introduced a new character and now I have no idea who this is. So that is the biggest con for me, and it's a con that it takes me almost completely away from audiobooks because I have to keep listening. To be honest, I have about 6 audiobooks that I'm in the middle of because I'm trying to find one that really was able to keep me. And the last one that did that, was funny enough, was Daisy Jones and the Six.
Which, full cast.
Yeah.
So
that might be a thing. That might be the thing that's going to help me to listen, because otherwise I'm having a problem with Harry Potter. I'm having a problem with The Hobbit, and I love those stories. Not that I don't know what's going on because I've already read them, but I'm missing it because I'm thinking about everything else. And I think that's one of the biggest cons with me reading and listening. When I'm reading, I'm all in. My eyes are there. My brain is focusing. When I'm listening, it's my ears and my brain is taken off. So.
Yeah. Well, when I first started listening to audiobooks, I didn't like it. I wasn't a fan. This was probably about 3.5 years ago. And a friend of mine who listens to audiobooks constantly, hi Camille, we'll give you a shout out. She told me, she's like, you need to listen to books that you've read already and kind of train your mind to pay attention. Because if you do miss a little bit, you're okay because you know the story, but just to kind of get into that flow of this is how I listen to an audiobook, because it is different.
Yeah.
And because it's different, I have a question.
Okay.
Does it count as reading?
Oh, see, that's the hot topic question right there.
It is, because my mom and I, we talk about this, and she does not believe that listening is the same thing as reading. So what say you, Shawna?
So for me, I think it counts as taking in literary works. Reading, it's just physically not reading. But I mean, right. I know what you mean when you say it's still reading, because it's still taking in the works. Right. So I think, for instance, if I'm saying, what have I read this summer? I would count in the audiobooks for those, because I can tell you about them. I can tell you about the character. I can recommend. I know the story. I have feelings for or against it. And I think all of that is what makes up reading. I do think it takes different parts of your brain listening. Like for me, I'm all in with a book. I'm 100% in. I'm like 50% in when I'm listening. But like you said, that's a skill that you can work on and grow. Now, I think audiobooks are such a great option for people who don't want to read, just don't like it. Because a lot of people, they try to read, and that's what zones them out, staring at words on a page.
Right.
And so I love that audiobooks are a difference. Again, also with my kids, they're early readers, but they're not reading chapter books yet. So I'm not just going to say, well, I'm just not going to read to you because it's not the same. So figure it out.
Not the same.
Because you're still getting that vocabulary. And that's also why I like one of the pros for audiobooks that we forgot to mention is listening to those hard books. Like we were talking about Outlander.
Right.
Like or a Game of Thrones. So that might be a hard book to read yourself because there's a lot of names and places that are hard to pronounce. But if it's being read to you, you can sit back, relax, and enjoy it. So I think it counts in the sense of how many books did you read this year? Oh, I read this many. And I don't think anybody needs to say, but 20 of those were audio. I don't think that's necessary.
Yeah, I think
it all counts.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I think we're totally on the same page on that one. Is that in my count at the end of the year, when I say I read 60 books this year, I mean read as I absorbed the content of 60 books.
Yes, exactly.
I mean read in a much broader sense. And I think that's where my mom and I have had that discussion because she's like, but it isn't reading. Reading is when your eyes are following words on a page. That's reading. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, I do understand that is
the literal term.
Yes.
I get it. But the intake of knowledge is still there. And I would much rather prefer, like, especially if my kids when they get older, and because I feel like there's a point when many children just don't read as much as you would want them to. Probably not you, but some children. But
I always got in trouble for reading too much. Go outside, Elizabeth. That's what they say.
But I feel like if my children came to me and they said, I didn't read, 10 books this summer or whatever it was, but I listened to 5 of them, I'd be like, you know what? I'm good with that because you got the information. You listen to new vocabulary words. You listen to sentence structure. You learn new geography or history or something like that. If you didn't, then you learn nothing.
Yeah. And for kids, that's still them making the choice to do that over playing a game or watching a movie or something else. So I think that when I worked at the library, we always counted audiobooks towards kids' summer reading program goals. Yeah. So, yes.
I have noticed, though, on my reviews, any book that I've listened to always ranks lower.
That's very interesting.
And I think it's because just me. It's not the book. I think I just was not as invested as I am with the print version. And I'm like, I think I spaced out too much that I didn't get the full quality of enjoyment, which is why I've made kind of this new rule for myself that if it's a book that I think I'm super interested in, I need to go get it and read it first. Print.
So I think that it's just the last question then. What is our favorite format?
And our least favorite.
Yes. So I think I could guess yours, but go ahead.
My favorite is print books, tree books. The books that come from our trees. Yes. And my least favorite is ebooks. Not that there's anything wrong with them. I just don't use them very much to have an opinion either way.
Right. My least favorite, same. I just don't enjoy them. And the same thing happens with me. When I read one, it automatically ranks lower. Like, it could be the best book ever, and it's only going to be 4 stars. Like, I just don't like them as much. And I take it out on those poor reviews. But, so that's definitely my least favorite. My most favorite.
I don't even know what you're going to say.
I know. I don't know what I'm going to say. I think my most favorite during this time of my life is audiobooks.
Really?
Yeah, because I think that if it wasn't for audiobooks, I would not be enjoying very many stories over the course of the year because I'm just busy.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have as much time to read, especially right now moving. I have not read a physical book yet this month. Because, I mean, I am reading one. I take one to work with me, but when I'm at work is the only time that I have to actually read a book. And so if it wasn't for audiobooks, I wouldn't have even read an entire book yet this month.
Yeah.
And so I think that for right now, which is such a cop-out answer, for right now.
No, but there are different seasons in our life, and which is so great that there's multiple ways to read. Because if there were no audiobooks, you would be reading no books right now.
That's exactly.
And that would make you a sad person.
That would make me such a sad person. But I absolutely understand when people say, oh, I don't have time to read. I get it, because right now in my life, I don't have a lot of time to read. And so I do make it more of a priority because I love it. But yeah, audiobooks for me.
Interesting. That's awesome. Well, for our listeners, we would love for you to head over to our Facebook page, Getting Bookish, and let us know what your favorite or least favorite is and why. Because I would love to know different people's opinions on this matter. And whether you feel that audiobook is, you should consider that reading.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so curious because these are very hot topics in the reading world. So I'm excited to hear everyone else's opinion. I hope you enjoyed listening to ours. And we'll be back next week.
See you later.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed hanging out with us.
Don't forget to check us out on social media and subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss out on any of the fun.
See you next week.